microphone muted unless you are called for to speak. If you wish to speak during the public comment, please indicate your interest via the chat box or using the raised hand function on Zoom. Staff monitoring Zoom will recognize you when it is your turn to speak. Second, we have a new member from the South Suburban Mayors and Managers Association, Mayor Michelle Nelson from Flossmoor. Mayor Nelson was unable to join us today, but she will attend our November meeting. Time for introductions and to confirm our quorum. I'm Mayor Shelkey, Chairman of the committee from the Kane-Kendall Council of Mayors. And when you introduce yourself, please also share which council you represent. And we also have Mayor Sherwin and President Lundquist will be joining us online due to work commitments. So let us go forth and ask everybody to start. Mayor Darch, you want to start?
Good morning. I'm Karen Darch from the Village of Barrington, representing the Northwest Council.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
George Van Dusen, Village of Skokie, representing the North Shore Council.
Tom Hayes, Village of Arlington Heights, Northwest Council.
Mary Warner, Village of Worth, Southwest Council.
Dave Brady, Village of Bedford Park, Southwest Council.
Leon Rockingham, City of North Chicago, Lake County.
What
Do you want to invite them online?
Yeah, we did. Mayor Sherwin, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Jeff Sherwin, City of Northlake, representing North Central.
And Mayor Lundquist, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, Greg Lundquist, Village of Northfield, North Shore Council of Mayors. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's see. This one here. In order to allow Mayor Sherwin to speak, we need a motion to allow the two that are Lundquist and Sherwin that are attending by Zoom so that they can be officially recorded. We need a motion.
Leon Rockingham, I make that motion.
Tom Hayes, second.
You have a motion second. All those in, can we just do a voice? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is approved. Would everyone in the room please introduce yourself by names or the organization you start? Let's start with the two of you up here at the front with.
Sure. Hi, I'm Laura Wilkinson, I'm Deputy Executive Director at CMAP.
Jane Grover, Principal at CMAP.
Joe Serdam, Lake County Council of Mayors.
Good morning, Jackie Forbes, Kane Kendall Council of Mayors.
Gretchen Clock, Kane Kendall Council of Mayors.
Brian Larson, North Shore Council of Mayors. Drew Duffin, McHenry County Council of Mayors.
George Candival, Kane Kendall Council of Mayors.
Eric Chernoto, Northwest Council of Mayors.
Brittany Matthews, Southwest Conference of Mayors.
Chad Whittle, IDOT Local Road.
Sarah Stolpe, CMAP.
Doug Ferguson, CMAP.
Julie Reschke, CMAP.
Alex Ball, CMAP.
John Carpenter, CMAP.
Ryan Gugis, CMAP. Ryan Tomto, CMAP. John Hodsma, CMAP.
Richard Norwood, CMAP.
He's out of Velez, CMAP.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome. I'm being told that we are one short of a quorum. Yeah, we are one short of a quorum, so we're going to go ahead and conduct the meeting.
For information.
For information on, it is. As you may have noted, we're running this a little bit different from now on. They give me a written script in which to read about. So now we know, now we do have a
I
quorum.
heard that,
Sorry.
I assumed, so I heard that no quorum, so I wanted to make sure I'm here.
Would you use your microphone, Mayor Kukler, and
Absolutely. Mark Kukler, Village of LaGrange, Central Council.
Thank you. Anyway, we're now working off of a script, which I guess before we were forgetting a few things, so now we're gonna have it all together. No, okay,
you can do the approval?
yeah, we have we have a set of minutes from the March 26, 2024 meeting. I entertain a motion to approve them.
So moved, Hayes.
Second, Rockingham.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Okay, CMAP announcements. We have a couple quick announcements from the CMAP staff. Jane?
Thank you, Mayor Schilke. Thank you to many of you on the committee and to our planning liaisons for spending time with Sarah and me over the summer to talk about the committee and what you hope and expect to get from it. We appreciate your insights and have worked to incorporate what we've learned from you into today's agenda and our planning for the next several meetings for this committee. You asked us in these discussions to kind of get back to basics on transportation programming, transportation planning, and I hope that today's agenda reflects that. And we will, over the course of the next few meetings, start working away at going back to basics and talking with you about how the process works and your role in it in this committee and how it fits into the larger scheme. We can't tackle it all in one meeting, so we're going to do it in bits and pieces over the next several. We would be glad to continue that conversation with each of you as we learn from each other about how to make these meetings valuable to you and to us, and appreciate your feedback along the way. And as part of our efforts to provide you with some good background information, Sarah Stolpe, our staff liaison here, and our communications team, big thanks to them, and our TIP team have put together a resource guide for you, which I hope will be a handy desktop reference for all things related to this committee and a good reference guide for you. It includes everything from a history of this Council of Mayors to a guide to acronyms to a whole lot of good information that Chad Riddle has provided us from IDOT about the letting schedule and so forth. Note that it also includes your bylaws that date back to 2001. And so I'm hoping that we can include in your agenda over the next several meetings an effort to revise those bylaws to bring them up to code and up to snuff. So we hope the resource guide is useful to you. If there's anything else that you'd like us to include in it or any corrections you'd like to make, please let us know. We promise to keep it updated and linked on our website so you can find it there as well. Thank you very much. Laura?
Feel your microphone
Oh, go
here. Hello again, I'm Laura Wilkeson. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Strategic Advancement here at CMAP, and we recently did a little bit of reorg that we have a Deputy Executive Director that's really focused on what's happening with facilities and HR and our communities, and that allows me to spend time on the content of our work and making sure that what we're doing with our communities and the papers and plans we're putting out really align with what your needs and concerns are. And in that space, we really recognize this is a really great forum to not only hear from you guys about what's happening in your communities, what trends, what are the resources that you need, and then also for us to share what we're working on and get your input. One of the things, again, we talk about today will be the regional transportation plan, and your perspective on that is going to be really important as we start to move through that process. Because it will be a resource to you and your communities. And one of the things we also look at is what are the resources that we provide that are actually meaningful for our communities. And we've been really excited year over year. Our community data snapshots are our most used piece of data that we put together. It's the most hits we get on our website, really specific, because there's so much information in those snapshots that communities use for grant applications, making decisions at the community level. So we have recently prepared those, and we've included a copy of the data snapshot for your municipality today, but we've also continue to innovate here at CMAP. So there's new pieces of information in there. So in this year's snapshots, we've included information about population with disabilities. We've got updated data on drinking water sources, water demand, and water pricing. We have a new information, fresh information on land use data, and we've also updated the employment characteristics, including the industries and locations in that information. So again, you can find those data snapshots on the website, and let us know if you have any questions or any issues accessing those. I think the other way that we really get information from our communities is through our My Daily Travel survey. And that is a really critical survey for us. There's many things we build around the data we get from that travel survey. So the responses that we get from the communities are really important to us. And we were happy to hear back from we're hoping to hear back from at least 4,000 households between now and spring of 2025. So we have already, the survey's out there. We've notified your village managers about this, but we really want to make sure that as you talk to residents or you put forth this information into your communities, that you really assure people that it is a legitimate survey and we use this information. It's critical for us and encourage them to complete it. We want to make sure that your residents, your communities are represented in that survey because it is how we understand how people are moving about the region. We do this every 2 years. And so again, if you can help us get the word out, help us get that to your communities that the survey is out there right now, that would be helpful for us. It helps us gauge the need for technical assistance and the resources we put to communities, as well as build, some of our policies and decisions around those as well. So excited that that is out and about right now. And back to you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm honored today to have Chad Riddle in the audience, and Chad is the Bureau Chief of Local Roads and Engineer for the IDOT's District 1. And Chad has provided us in advance with a number of documents that are included in the resource guide. You are welcome to ask any questions you have, but I'd like to invite Chad to come up and chat with us for a few minutes because I'm sure he's got some very interesting information. Welcome back. You're an old partner of us here.
I miss these meetings. I try to get down as much as I can. Now is it on? There, now it's green. Okay. Hello, everybody. This is the back, sorry. Yeah, I think a couple things. I didn't know I was on there, two agenda items, but the first one, this is a local road report, nothing exciting. Well, a lot of things exciting. We're busy. Now just a quick, like we just had the letting last week, we had over $44 million on projects on the September letting for locals. August, we had over 70 million. June was around 30 million and April was over 110 million. So when you start talking about the size of the programs and the size of the projects, local roads as a whole does as much work as the state side does. We do close to $1 billion going through local roads. I just want put that out there, and that's why we need you to make sure you follow the procedures, because there are a lot of things that have to be done, and we have, I won't say limited staff, but what the state does, and like I say, I'll refer, I guess in your booklet, there's that district overview. Those are state projects. None of the local projects are on there. This is the state's program. So that's their 7.4 billion over 5 years. So they're a little over $1 billion a year. We do over $1 billion a year between the federal programs, your MFT, your bond programs, and everything else. The state does that with many staff through programming design and other bureaus. We do it with a staff of about 20. So that is why when we reach out to you as far as issues and problems and potential delays, it's because procedures weren't followed. We are trying to shuffle. The letting coming up in November, we could have up to 20 projects on that letting pending right-of-way certification. So again, I appreciate all the help your staff does, your engineers do, the understanding you have with our tight schedules and trying to meet them. But again, it just comes down to how we want to discuss the issue of you can't rush a project through the process. I always tell people, if you want something done fast, pay for it yourself. If you want someone to pick up 60, 70, 80% of that project work through federal programs or state programs, you have to go through the hoops. And we don't establish the hoops. But we are the ones that are required through our agreement with Federal Highway and everything else to make sure that all those check boxes are done to get these projects out onto the street. And with that, comes the lead time, comes the processing, comes a lot of things we don't have control of, especially when it comes to environmental. Right away is 90% of the time in the hands of the local agency. And we always get caught with projects that come up for letting that, like I said, we might have 20 projects on a November letting because a lot don't have right away, but those that did clear right away. But we had maybe 10 or 15 projects that said they could make November letting, but right away didn't clear. And that wasn't a situation. So we went through the work of preparing plans and specs and getting prepped for a letting, but then last minute, because right away certification, if you look at the schedule, is toward the end, didn't make it. So feds can't authorize it, so it can't be put on letting. So it gets put back in the queue and we have to reprocess again for the next letting. So that's some of our headaches we have. So I do have talking points, but I'm a rambler, so keep me on track if you want. They wanted me to come and just talk about, she gave me some topics and gave me about 15 minutes. So I will try to do what I can, but I will feed information. But again, I'm looking also for feedback from you guys as far as issues you've had, because I always said, if there's a consultant, a local agency, and IDOT that are involved in these projects, if you ever have two of them in a room, you know whose fault it is. So again, and usually we're not in the room, so I will leave it at that. So again, I try to distinguish, there's a state program and a local program. If you look at the MYP, there are, for the district, it lists, it's online, it's fun to look at. It lists all the state projects, but then there's a section also under each district that says the local program. And that program is established through local roads, through your staff, and the planning liaisons as projects that we have actually established with a target letting in those given years. We are tracking a lot of projects that we call them unprogrammed because if we program something that ties up money, but I don't like, if we program it too early, it ties up money that may not be used because it's going to be delayed. So we'll try to program things closer to when it's actually going to be established for the letting. So not everything in your program will show up in the state's MYP. And again, when it comes to the councils, I want to emphasize your program is what comes from the planning liaisons. It's not what shows in our MYP. It's what your planning liaisons show you and what you do through your call for projects. That establishes your program, and we urge you to try to keep to that schedule and try to keep to those projects. Other things that they wanted to touch upon, and I'm going through here as much as I can, and a lot of it's in there. Funding. The other thing I want to emphasize is the state monitors their program through the TAMP. So they pick the projects, they pick the schedule, they set the schedule, they maintain the schedule, they can trade things in and out. Local roads, IDOT, we do not control what projects are chosen through what programs. And all we are responsible for is once you get money, we are the people you have to process that project through. So again, it comes down to, the quality of your projects, make sure they qualify for the fund type that you get established, and make sure that when you go into those projects are carried through. And it's just an understanding again of the process. Program wise, there's a lot of them listed there. I'm not going to go into detail, but like I say, we don't set the program. So you work with CMAP, you work with the planning liaisons, the state does put out through circular letters. And I want to emphasize, I think all the planning liaisons are on circular letter lists, right? So circular letters come out from our central office with what we call NOFOs, Notice of Funding Opportunities. That is what comes out, and that is where you need to work with your staff, your engineers to say, right now there's an open call for ITEP and there's an open call for Illinois Special Bridge Program. It's up to you to fill out the application, submit them through the process that's outlined in the circular letter. Some go through me, some go directly to the central office, some are online, click and it's entered. But again, you getting those projects into the system is the same thing as when they do a call for projects for SDP. And once you get that project and you get awarded that project, that's when we kick in to what we need to do for our processing, through our engineering, through our design, and then through the letting. And again, as far as the programs we track, there's some listed in there. There's probably 20 to 30 active federal programs out there that if you get funding for them, we would have to do them. There's been a lot of big ones lately, the infra grants, the RAISE grants. Those are for major projects. A lot of locals have got some of those grants, which we're happy for in a way, but then it's like, no, now we got to process them. So I'm rooting for you most of the time. I'll put it that way. So we'll see how that plays out. So again, that's what we work with. So we work with, the funding program, but you ever understand that you are responsible for getting your projects. And once you get it, we will process it. Any questions on that or any concerns, any issues you've had in difficulty with applications or difficulty with scoping or anything like that you want to discuss?
Any questions? You got the guy here that knows the answers.
Yeah, I
so-
mean, I'll just take it I'll get little bits in time here. So, and so again, then we just want to make sure that, our program is met. We do at times get in trouble, as you might know, with your local program that, and this comes down to, this is being recorded, so I got to be careful what I say. The state gets a pot of money, and a certain pot of money goes to the state program, and a certain pot of money goes to the local program. And we've always fought for more money for the locals, through whatever program it might be, through, your SDP is pretty much set, but through the bridge program, through enhancement, through CMAQ, we've been fighting to get more money because we say, locals are always saying, we need to do our projects. We need money to do our projects. We need money to do our projects. But in some cases, we need to be careful because we get the money, and if we establish through a program that you have all these projects queued up through, like, especially at the SDP program, I'll take that as a specific because you're used to that we're going to have all these projects queued up that are going to go this year. Well, through the processes of, right away, some of the environmental issues, some changes in political preferences, all of a sudden, big projects that were urgent don't get done, and that creates a big hole in our program. And then all of a sudden, when it gets Springfield stuff looking at, say, we gave you all this money, you didn't spend it all, so we might reduce what you're going to get down the line. So we want to make sure that we can move these projects forward and get them spent. But again, this comes down to knowing how these get processed and knowing the lead time and making sure that everything follows that process.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
So I understand, so you got a project and you put it in, and I understand you got to jump through the hoops. But when, we submit it and we may not have put all the right information in, or, what is the turnaround time? So we submit it, you give us.
It depends on what, again, there's different, usually we're pretty good. And again, it comes down to, realistic versus expectations. One thing I'll highlight in the last few years, I know that, for many, many years, possibly decades, the concern was, we have an engineering firm ready to do work, but you are delaying our notice to proceed because it's taking 6 months to get it through the system, through the agreement, to get it down, to get it authorized by the feds, to give you notice to proceed. And every month that's delayed, you're potentially putting off that project. And if you delay it too much, you might be pushing off a construction season. So the feds finally, not finally, but the feds, put a action into law that now we can give you the 1440 process. I mean, many of you are familiar with that, but basically says that if you, have initially got your engineer, you did the proper quality-based selection, you get us the documented paperwork, we can give you early notice to proceed prior to federal authorization. That'll come down the line, but that way, instead of taking 6 months or more to get your engineer out there, it was taking 4 to 6 weeks. And that greatly reduced, can I use the word complaints on the microphone? Yeah, complaints about delaying those agreements. So again, so we got that going. And one thing I will say is this came out, it was great. It took a little time to get people used to it, but people are using it pretty often now. But now we're to the point that, okay, we submitted our 1440 and we're saying 4 to 6 weeks because we have to review it. Then it's just, then it comes down to timing to get it through the feds to get it authorized, and then it comes back, whatever. All of a sudden now we're getting calls after a week and a half saying, is it approved yet? Is it approved yet? Because we tried to reduce it from 6 months to 4 to 6 weeks, and now it's like, well, can you reduce it from 4 to 6 weeks to 2 weeks? You know, you have to work with us on what the realistic expectations. So again, and that's where we start looking at knowing the process. And the one thing that is in your book is the milestones. These are the steps in the major steps that need to be taken to get through a process. A story I tell often, and I won't name the council or the local agency or the mayor, was years ago. I'll say years ago. I was at a transportation committee meeting for one of the councils, and they voted on their program. And say if it would be like if the meeting was today and the mayor was there and they approved a roadway reconstruction for Main Street in his village. So he was all excited. He got the money. He just wanted this project to go. So he approaches me after the meeting, says, now that we have this money, you have a letting in November. Can we get this project on that November letting? Which, you know, in theory is 2 months from now. And it catches me a little off guard in the fact, and that's why I think we're doing this is, you know, do all the local agencies know the process? Do they share the process? You know, and is everybody aware of the lead time that's needed to get these projects through the system? So, and that's something, again, that we're trying to emphasize, and we're trying to make sure, you know, there are, we do the best we can. If you look at our letting schedule, which I think is the last 2 pages, we clearly have target dates for projects to have design approval before we're going to process them any further. And we have been overly generous with local agencies that say, we don't have design approval yet, but we're going to get it in time. Can we move this ahead? Well, we've had a lot that haven't got it in time. And again, just like right away, no design approval, can't get the project approved, can't get on the letting. And again, I don't want to have to, I don't want to play hardball or whatever you want to call it, but we're trying to work with you, but you need to also be aware of our situation. You know, same thing with right of way, where right of way certification date for the November letting was just about a week ago. You know, locals are saying, well, we're going to have the last document we need, you know, by the end of the week after next. Can we just get that extra time? You know, you've known these deadlines since you established your project, and you should have kicked it off, and it's on the milestone. So we're trying, again, to work with you. It's been a rough year because I know in the spring, there was a lot of programs through the councils that said, you know, all these funds sunset in September. And that is one reason why our November letting is pretty big, because that was the last letting that we could get funds authorized in fiscal year 24 to count them as spent. So we are trying to, again, work with you on that sense and make sure that, you know, we're doing the best we can to get your project on the street, because we want accomplishments, and we want to not have to process these more than one time through the system. Okay, so I talked about the multi-year plan, our Office of Planning and Programming down in central office. Again, they establish our budget, and we work with them. And one good thing I think in my 20 plus years of doing this, I've never told a local agency, because of funding, you have not been able to make a letting. So we worked with you, you know, on your funding. If the funding is there, we made sure we had a pot to pull it from to make the letting you wanted to make. You know, you didn't have to miss a letting because of a fiscal year budget or something like that. So again, that's one thing we are very, very good in that sense. Lettings, I mean, they talked about, I know a lot of people push, and right now we're in a push for November, January, and March lettings. This is usually some of our larger lettings, because everybody's saying, you know, we get those out on the street, so they're out there first, you know, first day of construction season next year, you can get everything done, hopefully in one construction season, which makes projects less costly because you won't have winter shutdown if it takes more than one construction season. So again, we are working with you to make those schedules and make sure that everything plays through. And again, so our typical timeline, as we talked about, and again, this is there, and there's another nice little flow chart. And this is where, it's in your book, but I think you've seen this. And the other thing I want to emphasize is prior to COVID, we would do our local road seminar about every other year, and we had some nice turnout here and there. We recently did that in the spring, and we always emphasize, there are 280 plus communities and townships and counties that use local roads for their projects. And we did this seminar 2 days, same seminar. So we did it 2 sessions, and we had maybe 120 people attending. So that's less than 1 per local agency. So again, it comes down to, we try to throw all this information out and make it available to you to know our process, to know what. So again, when we hit you with a situation that says your project's not going to make a schedule you deem because of this, it doesn't cause major unknowns or whatever. You should have been aware of this coming into this. So again, we're trying to work with you, but again, there are all those key factors we need to take into place. So again, I'm rambling a little about that. Any questions with the processing, with the timelines? I mean, are we good with this? The other thing I want to emphasize, God bless you, you're great, but we get caught off guard a lot when it comes to, I cringe when you look at the first column of the letting schedule, there's that date that says pre-final plans. And all of our projects, in theory, prior to pre-final plan should have a kickoff meeting through the planning liaisons with our phase 2 staff to say, we're targeting a November 2025 letting. So you should have a kickoff meeting. So we explain to you what's needed leading up to your plans coming in May of 2025. So we know what to expect. We know what's coming. We can have an anticipation about what's going to happen. Well, 2 things happen. Like when we have the plans that came in September 6th for the March letting, I think we had a list of maybe 30 projects that we thought would make March because they told us it was going to make March. Well, of those 30, we might have got plans from, I think maybe 17 or 18 of them because they're planning on making March. The other 12 or 13, silence. So we don't know. So it puts us in a situation where we got to reach out to them to say what happened. And they go, oh, we found a delay. We're moving it off to some other letting. Well, they need to let us know and keep us in that loop. But then there's even a bigger problem in the fact that we're going to get 10 projects that just all of a sudden show up. Here's plans for the letting on the pre-final date, and we had no idea they were coming. We don't have a PPI. They don't have design approval. We don't know what's going on with them. And we work the best we can because what we try to require is a project should have been kicked off. Project should have a PPI because if we're processing it for phase 2, there should be money. And if there's money, we need to make sure it's there to be programmed. So that's one thing I want to emphasize is that, if you're as a local agency, plan liaisons or whatever, if you're working with engineers that are targeting lettings, make sure there's an active PPI, make sure there's an active schedule, make sure IDOT's aware this is coming. So again, we try to make sure that everything plays out in that sense. And again, we don't send things back and say, what told us it was coming. We work with you the best we can to do that. So again, that's another emphasis I want to make.
Thank you for what's been a very comprehensive and complete report of kind of an update. So
I've sort of thrown things out there, and I think you want me to come back or be available periodically. So this is sort of let me throw it at the wall. And if you want to talk to your staff, talk to your engineers and say, IDOT said this, and they're going to say IDOT's wrong because they're not in the room. I know that, but I'll be back. The other thing they wanted to touch upon, I'll touch upon them real quick. was, jurisdictional transfers. Those go through local roads, and those are, they're not rare, but they're not on a regular basis. And usually those relate to, rarely does it relate to local roads. I won't say local jurisdictional streets going to the state. It's usually state unmarked routes going to locals. And, so if you have an unmarked route, you know, in your jurisdiction that you feel you want to take over, and a lot of times this is required if the state is participating. If they have an unmarked segment of road and you want to reconstruct it, the state might work with you to pick up the match or produce a contribution to improve that road, which makes it better for your local agency. But at the end, they're going to say, because this is a unmarked state route, it's an orphan segment that the state really doesn't want. At the end of the project, then you'll take over jurisdiction of that route. But, you know, again, and that's both good and bad. It takes it off the state's books because it's sometimes just out there, but it also gives you more control over land use zoning and everything else along that street. And again, the quick history for that is I forget the act, but back in the 20s, when all the dirts were gravel and all the roads were dirt and gravel and everything else, the state said, if you pave it with concrete, the state will take jurisdiction. So all these locals paved all these streets with concrete, and they all became state responsibility. And then finally, I think in the 60s, the state said, no, paving is state of the art. We're not going to have this anymore. But the state still has these on the books, and they have to maintain them. So again, and where that jurisdiction is, you can work with your plan liaisons. There's a app online. You can get iRoads that talks about who has jurisdiction. So you can start looking at, is this my road? Is this their road? And all that kind of stuff. And other than that, I think I'll leave it open for any last questions or anything you feel I might have touched on that I didn't go too deep, or if I went too deep in something, I apologize.
I think you've been very comprehensive in what you've done. Does anybody in the group have any immediate questions of?
Jeff, just to say that the resource guide has already come in handy, because the CMAP guide to acronyms tells me that a PPI is a project program information form. And so it's already come in handy. Thank you.
Hopefully your staff knows what they are. Yeah. And again, so that's what I have. Any other questions? Jane, did I cover what you wanted to cover today? Is there anything I didn't?
You did a great job.
Well,
I
Karen?
just have a comment.
Yes.
Chad, I think a project that we all love is making the November letting, but I just want to say thank you to your staff.
I'm not going to say anything till October 5th when it's actually posted.
Okay, good. Good, but thank you so much. SDP funds were awarded in 2019.
Yeah.
And it's been a huge, complicated, this is a great separation project in Barrington, but we appreciate all the time and effort. I love that you gave us this. I actually might invite you out to Barrington to do a postmortem on that project, and really all the had a crazy environmental. It was more than this.
And again, and that's, I appreciate that. And again, she's talking about the US 14 at Barrington Road grade separation.
Yeah.
Said that out loud. So again, and that's, and we love those projects. I mean, local roads, people think about, oh, you go out and resurface street, you do neighborhoods and that kind of stuff. We have that project. We had the 143rd Street roadway extension for some $50 million. We've had multiple segments on Randall Road. The last one in August went for over $50 million. We had an $80 million project in Will County, that kind of stuff. So again, we do projects. We do get the $100,000 sidewalk projects, but we also get tens of millions of dollars, up to $100 million when it comes to these great separations and all those type of projects too. So again, I appreciate your understanding. I appreciate the respect you give myself and my staff. I say, don't shoot the messenger. We bend as much as we can, because I always say, as you've been at IDOT in any meetings, some locals coming in want to talk to our regional engineer, and he'll sit at the head of the table, and IDOT staff will sit on one side, the locals will sit on the other side. I always sit on the local side, because I got your back if you have my back. And again, I'm always pro-local. So with that, I appreciate your time. And like I say, if there's any issues you want me to cover at the next one, I'll be looking for Jane to work with you to give me some more topics or more clarification, but,
Well, thank you for coming today and doing all you did.
okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. Next, we're gonna have a CMAP federal funding overview, and we're honored to have Doug Ferguson here to do this. Doug.
Next slide. So today, sorry, my name is Doug Ferguson. I'm a senior program analyst with the Research Analysis and Programming Group here at CMAP. I'm also the project manager for our federal programs, and I'm going to give kind of a high-level overview of the different surface transportation federal programs that come to our region that are decided by our region. So I'm going to cover 4 different federal programs: the STP program, the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program, Carbon Reduction Program, and last but not least, the Transportation Alternatives Program. Next slide. So STP is going to be broken into 2 different groups, the local and the shared fund. Next slide. I think on the local side, these are the funds that your councils in the city of Chicago program on an annual basis. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on these. I think these are kind of what you guys know. But next call for projects for those funds is next fall in 2025. But on the shared fund, next slide. These funds are overseen by the SDP Project Selection Committee. The Project Selection Committee is made up of 7 voting members, 3 from the Council of Mayors, and then 3 from the City of Chicago, and then CMAP. We also additionally have non-voting member participation from FHWA, FTA, the counties, and the RTA. These are really kind of focused on funding regional projects that have that can be more transformative in a regional scope. It can do a lot of different things with these funds, including including road reconstructions and expansion, transit station and yard and terminal improvements, bus speed improvements, safety truck routes, highway grade crossing separations, and bicycle and pedestrian barrier elimination projects. There's roughly about 30 million a year that is in the STP shared fund. Next slide. There are a couple of different eligibility requirements. So the total project cost, not what you're asking from the shared fund, but the total project cost has to be at least a minimum of $5 million, or has to include 3 local partners that are coming together to make the project happen. One of those should be a local municipality. Next slide. Moving on to the CMAQ and CRP programs. I'm going to kind of do these 2 together because they're very similar, and we kind of handle them in the same vein. The CMAQ program has been around since 1991, but the Carbon Reduction Program, or CRP program, was just established in the last federal authorization bill. So next slide. This is overseen by the CMAQ, CRP, and TAP-L Project Selection Committee. That committee is made up of representatives from IDOT, Council of Mayors, the counties, City of Chicago, CMAP, and RTA, and finally CMAP. Sorry, there's 7 of them, and I can get a little tongue-tied with all of them. This program is really focused on air quality. With CMAQ, we're really focused on ozone elimination and the precursors that cause ozone. And then with the CRP, it's focused on greenhouse gas emissions reductions. There's approximately about 140 million a year that are between the 2 programs that is available for that. Next slide. types of projects that these two programs can fund are bicycle facilities, direct emissions reduction. These are really fuel and vehicle technology projects such as electric buses, compressed natural gas fueling stations, EV charging stations are kind of all bundled under that. Transit service and capital projects, so we can fund capital improvements for transit and then also new transit service. And then the traffic flow improvements, these include intersection improvements, signal interconnects, bottleneck elimination projects. And then last, we have our other and demonstration. So others, any project that has an emissions benefit, but doesn't fit into one of our other program categories. And then demonstration are projects that we think have a emissions benefit project or benefit, but we're not sure. And we don't do a whole lot of these. Right now, Lake County actually has a project that's looking at connected vehicle technology. So it's going to help us make an estimation of these type of projects in the future. So even if it hasn't been done in this region, if it's been done other places, and we can estimate based upon that, that wouldn't fall into the demonstration, it would probably fall into the other category. I will add that there's two things that these programs can't fund, and that's general maintenance projects or replacement in kind. So we can't do a resurfacing project or a reconstructive or roadway with these funds. And we can't add single occupancy vehicle throughput, so no add lanes projects. And these are the federal requirements for the two programs. It's not something that we've established. Next slide. And then we have our locally programmed transportation alternatives program. Like CRP and CMAQ, it's overseen by the CMAP, CRP, and TAPL Project Selection Committee. But it's really focused on bicycle facility projects that help complete the Regional Greenways and Trails Plan. So the Regional Greenways and Trails Plan is a planning product that we do as part of our comprehensive planning. It identifies regional bike facilities and greenways that we want to see completed to complete overall network. So that's really what we're focused here on. There's approximately 20 million a year that we have available for programming. So I know I went through these really quickly, but we will be doing a call for projects, and in a couple of agenda items, another staff member will be talking about the call for projects. So I don't want to go into too much detail on that. But with that, I'm more than happy to take any questions you may have on these federal programs.
Any questions, Doug? You've been pretty thorough in your presentation, so thank you. And
I've done this for a while
I
now.
know. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next we're gonna go to the Surface Transportation Local Programming Summaries, and we have Sarah Stolpe here that's going to make a presentation to us. Sarah?
Good morning, everyone. Sarah Stolpe, analyst here at CMAP, also committee staff support, wearing a lot of hats this morning. But programming staff here at CMAP are excited to share a new resource that's been developed for the STP local program. Staff has produced 12 program summary brochures detailing the latest STPL call for projects that Doug just alluded to, and program development for the sub-regional councils in the city of Chicago. Physical copies are available and were included for each of your councils at your seats here. And we'll briefly show you on the screen just how to navigate through these and what a little bit of this information means for you all. From the CMAP STP webpage, these documents are located under the STP local program section, and you'll find them under program summary for each of your councils. On the screen today, we have Central Council used as an example, but again, you guys do have the copies of your council here today. On the first page here, you can see an overview of funding programs and a detailed map of project locations by project type, and a summary of the 2025 to 2029 call for projects. The next page on the screen here goes into more detail onto the call for projects process and policies, including a breakdown of scoring methodology. Next slide. The next overview page highlights how the latest call for projects fits into the program as a whole. Here we see a bit more about the active program management of these projects, as well as information about how some of these projects advance regional goals toward accessibility and active transportation. Finally, the last page includes key information on council membership, contacts, and project readiness to prime future applicants for that next call coming up in 2 years here, and let programmers know what's to come and how to stay involved. This information was compiled this summer, and future updates are anticipated to occur about annually unless there are any major changes to your programs. Staff believe that this will be a helpful resource across the region, and we plan to continue sharing these out so they can be used by CMAP and council members, other regional stakeholders, and the general public to better understand the program development processes here at CMAP and through each council. The team is happy to hear feedback if you have any on the content or any distribution ideas. But otherwise, these will continue to live on in future iterations.
Question?
Sure, I have a question. So I'm trying to see how this all fits together. These are the STP grants, right?
Yes, the STP locally programmed grants.
So is that where you need $5 million projects?
That would be the shared fund, which will be the next agenda item. We'll get into a little bit more of
So
that.
this funding, what type of projects will this fund?
Very similar to the STP shared fund. It's going to be major road infrastructure projects. So you're thinking like modernization, reconstruction. You'll see a little bit breakdown of the project types included in each program in the brochure. And so it's pretty similar to what we'll see in the next presentation here. And then
Is there a dollar amounts that usually get funded?
the only thing is up to the maximum available funding.
Is there like
A minimum.
100,000 is too small or?
I don't believe so.
Any other questions?
I just want to say that these brochures are really well prepared. I know that I did pick up some at the last meeting, and I put them out, at City Hall. And just the feedback, even from there, I got back was very good. So thank you. I think this is, it really goes through all the different things and that we're doing up here at, here for the council and CMAP. So
Yeah.
great job.
Thank you so much. And if you guys do want to take any additional copies home to other meetings you may have, there are additional copies in the hallway available for each council.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
All right. Next one is the call for projects, STP Shared Fund, CMAP, CRP, and TAP-L. And we've got is it John Hesse. John?
Yes, thank you and good morning, mayors and presidents. My name is John Hodsma. I'm a program analyst, and like Sarah and Doug, I'm on the research analysis and programming team. So I'm just going to give more context on how the timing works for these programs that they've outlined, and just speak to some of the methodologies and the changes to those methodologies that have happened for this upcoming call for projects we're going to be having. So Doug initially mentioned the timing of the call for projects, and I just want to go over that again and emphasize the importance of even and odd years. So in even years, like we are now, 2024, there's a call for projects for CMAC, TAP-L, CRP, and the shared fund. And then in odd years, such as 2023 or what we're going to be coming into 2025, there's a call for projects for the 11 councils STP programs, along with the City of Chicago's call for projects. And that structure was intentionally set up to be like that, to ensure there's funding constantly available to the region each year, so the projects can continue to be advanced. And again, since we're in an even year, we're about to enter the start of the call for projects period for CMAC, TAP-L, CRP, and the shared fund. And that's going to open next month on October 21st. And it's going to run for 2 months, and it'll close on December 20th. The important time there is 5 p.m., so don't wait until midnight. And then once that call for projects is closed between January and April, staff's going to check for eligibility of applications, analyze and score each project, and put together draft programs that we'll bring to the project selection committees in April, and we'll introduce those. They will vote to approve to move those to a public comment period, and it'll be out for public comment for 30 days. We'll take back any feedback we've received from the project selection committees and public comment period, revise the programs, bring it back to the project selection committees for their approval at their May meeting, and they'll consider it for approval. And at that point, it'll move on to the transportation committee. And then finally, its final stop being the MPO policy committee for their approval at their June board meeting. So that's what the structure looks like. It's going to be pretty quick. And, you know, as you know, we're about a month out from the start of that call for projects period. So there's a couple other things I want to point out about this call for projects, and the funding being one of those, and the funding is going to be programmed to projects for federal fiscal years 2026 through 2030. So the years 2026 through 2028 were available years for the call for projects 2 years ago. And the reason I bring that up is because those years have had projects already programmed into them. Whereas years 2029 and 2030, those are brand new years, meaning we have a lot of availability to program new projects there. So a lot of the ones that are awarded are going to be awarded for years 2029 and 2030. The next item is the fund source documents. And again, there's a lot of information that I've already covered, and we're only hitting the tip of the iceberg there. So to help facilitate some of these key eligibility requirements, dates of these upcoming funding opportunities, and get across some other key information of these programs, staff have developed one-page documents for each fund source, which are included in your materials today. They are the ones that look like this. And there's 3 of them, one for SDP, one for CMAQ and CRP, and one for TAP-L. These are going to be getting distributed throughout the region to different communities for the call for projects, and they're also going to be available on our website. If you want additional copies that you can bring back with you to either your council or community, just let CMAP staff member know, and we can make sure to get those to you. On these, you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner of the document is the scoring criteria or the methodology of each fund source. And this is going to be the last part of my presentation I'm going to cover. I'm going to be highlighting the changes for each fund source this cycle. And again, the summary that I'm going to go through here of the changes is going to be pretty high level. The intent of it is just to flag it for you all, so your councils and communities are aware of the changes. And again, we'll have a webinar later on where we're going to have more time to dig into these changes, and your staff will be notified of when that webinar is scheduled for. So starting off with CMAQ and CRP here, and as Doug mentioned, CMAQ and CRP are very similar, and they are analyzed using the same methodology roughly, just with certain nuances here and there. Each program has a heavy emphasis on the cost benefit of emissions reduction of the project, and that's 50% of the score. The other half of that score, so there's 50 other points, and 30% of it is based off the transportation impact criteria, and that's scored based off the type of project that gets submitted. So whether it's highway or a transit project or a bicycle pedestrian project. And then the remaining 20% of the score is an equity category that has 2 scoring sections to it that are each worth 10 points. There's only been one change to the methodology for this cycle for these 2 programs, and that changes how applicants will complete the disadvantaged communities section under the equity category. And the change has to do with updated Justice 40 guidance from USDOT that we reflected into the methodologies. And the update's going to ask applicants to use DOT's Equitable Transportation Community Explorer tool to answer 2 prompts. The first is to identify vulnerable population groups in the project area and demonstrate how the project will benefit those groups. And then the second prompt is going to ask applicants to identify disadvantaged burden categories within the project area and demonstrate how the project is going to address those burdens. We move on to the next slide. This is going to be pretty quick, but I did want to call attention to this, the transportation impact criteria, that's 30 points again. So just highlighting that based off the project type that you see to the left side, so whether it's highway, transit, bicycle, or direct emission reductions, it'll have slightly different criteria it's going to be analyzed under. We move on to the next slide. We'll have the TAP-L program. And for TAP-L, the only scoring change has been that disadvantaged community scoring I just went over, so I'm not going to go through that again. But it's going to act exactly the same as it does with CMAQ and CRP. And the rest of the methodology remains the same, with 30% being for the completion of the regional greenways and trails plan, 20% being the market for the facility, 20% being safety and attractiveness, 20% being equity, and the last 10% being for project readiness. The last one I have here is the shared fund, and there have been changes. There have been 3 changes to how things are scored, but there hasn't been any changes to the overall weights of the program. So that remains the same, being 15% for project readiness, 50% for transportation impact, 30% being for planning factors, and 5% being for sub-regional priority. Out of the 3 changes, there's only one that will impact every application that gets submitted, and that is how the jobs and households category is going to be calculated. And in the past, they've been combined, the number of jobs and number of households. And for this cycle, those jobs and households are going to be split out and scored separately, 5 points each, and then combined for a total of 10 points. The other 2 changes are going to be project type dependent, meaning it won't impact every project application. It's going to be dependent on what type of project gets submitted. And for projects scored for resilience, which is under the planning factors category, the Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan, or TRIP, is going to be used to assess where there are higher flood or heat exposures, and projects that are located where there are higher flood and heat exposures scores from that TRIP climate vulnerability assessment will receive more points for inclusion of eligible resilience elements that address the vulnerability that than those located where the TRIP vulnerability scores are lower. So really trying to assess where the need is higher. And then the last change is a small modification to how the efficiency score is calculated for the rail yard and terminal projects within the improvement section of the scoring. And staff's going to be using non-revenue miles eliminated rather than using trips eliminated to better reflect efficiencies gained in the relocation of yards closer to the beginning of its routes. And if we move on to the next slide, again, same with the CMAQ and CRP. So this is the planning factor scoring. It'll be dependent on the type of project it is. So to the left side, you can see the type of project. And then to the far right, you can see all of them are going to be worth 30 points, but how those 30 points get allocated is slightly different based off the 5 criteria that'll go across the top, which include inclusive growth, complete streets, resilience, which I talked about, and that's where the change is, freight, and transit supportive density. So that concludes the methodology changes for this cycle. Hopefully having a summary document of the STP programs that Sarah gave you and the funding source one-pagers can provide you and your communities more information on how these fund sources operate and are structured and what kind of projects are being selected. So we are always looking for your feedback, and if there's anything else, especially your communities want, that would be helpful to have. We're always happy to take that feedback and produce a new product if that is helpful. So thanks for your time. If there are any questions, happy to answer them or hand them off to Doug or Sarah.
Anybody have any questions to John? Well, thank you. That's a very inclusive report. I appreciate today all this effort being made to kind of update some of the newer people here on how all these funds work and where it comes about. Our next one, I guess, is going to be the Social Economic Forecast and Regional Transportation Plan. And we got Alex Balls is going to talk to us about that.
All right, thank you, everyone. This will be a somewhat abbreviated presentation, but I'll just note that we're happy to we'll talk about ways for people to get involved in next steps, and we're doing this presentation or versions of this for some of the councils as well. So I'm Alex Balls, he, him, Senior Analyst with the Research Analysis and Program Division and the Project Manager for the Socioeconomic Forecast. Next slide. Next slide. So we do a socioeconomic forecast in part because it's a federal requirement for all MPOs that we do transportation and land use forecasting to at least a 20-year planning horizon. This year we'll be forecasting, or for this plan, we'll be forecasting through 2050. Every MPO does it slightly differently, but they all have two general steps. So one being a regional forecast of where we're collectively headed. So things like population and jobs for the 7-county region. And then a separate local forecast process that kind of allocates them to different towns and areas within the region. We recently completed a draft of the regional forecast, and that's what we're focusing on for this presentation, but we will be kind of doing the local forecast over the next year or so and wanting your input. Next slide. So the forecast is used in a lot of different parts of the regional transportation plan, largely to determine like how many resources we'll have and where we should be investing as a region. And it's also used in the scenario planning process to think about different potential futures the region might be encountering and how we can be prepared for all of those. Next slide. What we're actually forecasting with the forecast is the three major components of population change. So that's the number of births in the region, the number of deaths in the region, the number of people that move in and out of the region, and then separately, the number of jobs in the region. And you can see highlighted here that migration and jobs are some of the hardest to project. Next slide. So the forecast uses a lot of different data sources, many of them from federal agencies like the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And we also combine that with historical data about things like birth and mortality in the region, try to get a sense of what our population will be. We also purchase a jobs forecast from Moody's Analytics, which covers a lot of different inputs and a lot of different considerations as we look forward to the future. And that helps us kind of predict the level of migration. So we look at kind of the number of jobs and the number of people we expect to be here if there wasn't any migration. And then that kind of labor gap is filled by people moving into the region to fill those jobs. Next slide. Next slide. So one more. So just some high-level national context to this. The US population growth has been slowing. 2019, 2020, and 2021 also 100-year lows in growth. This is at the national level. The census, which produces a forecast every 3 to 5 years of just national population, that forecast has been going down, especially the most recent one released in late 2023, and is now 28 million fewer than the last time we did a forecast. Next slide. So this shows our current draft regional forecast. That's this light green bar on the far right. And the two green bars next to it are the 2018 and 2022 forecasts that CMAP did. So some of the main takeaways here is that the forecast is going down over time, but our forecast is still that the region will be growing at a slow rate. Some of the trends that we're seeing that lead to that kind of slower growth than in past forecast is that we've been seeing lower mortality or lower birth rates. We've been seeing lower level of jobs growth from when we're purchasing our jobs forecast. And as mentioned, the census projections that we incorporate into some of our forecasts have been going down. Next slide. This just shows the region in comparison with the Illinois Department of Public Health. Empirically, the region has been growing over the last 10, 20 years, but that rate of growth has been slowing. The Illinois Department of Public Health, which forecasts our region through 2035, it's actually showing a decrease, which is not what we're showing, but that's definitely within the realm of possibility. And some of the big takeaways is they're showing, again, we haven't gone this granular to the county level, but they are showing that the collar counties are gaining population while Cook County, the region as a whole in the state, are losing population. Next slide. This just kind of puts our forecast in comparison with other MPOs. Again, the major takeaway being that most MPOs are showing that their projected growth rates going forward will be lower, in some cases less than half of the growth rates they've been seeing. And that's again due to these larger socioeconomic trends that are impacting the nation as a whole and also impacting our region. Next slide. So we want to talk briefly about the next steps. We're in the process of reviewing the regional forecast results. We're meeting with a local advisory group where each council of mayor and council of government has had a chance to kind of nominate a member to that, as well as working with Urban Sim, a consulting agency that helps us with our local forecast. And as mentioned, we're looking at our vision plan and thinking of different scenarios or different types of growth the region might experience or not experience going forward and how we can plan for that. Next slide. Next slide. So this shows just some of the representatives of our local advisory group. This is our main way of trying to get engaged with the local municipalities, understand kind of how the forecast impacts them, things we should be capturing on the ground or making sure that we're covering. So if we go to the next slide, this shows a list of people that are currently on the local advisory group for each council or for each council. You'll note on the next slide that there are some councils that have not nominated a member. So if you see your name on this list, please get in touch with Sarah or myself, and we'd love to get as much of the region engaged as possible as we kind of move from this regional forecast to the local forecast. Next slide. This is my contact info. I think we'll do questions after my colleague does a quick update on the regional transportation plan.
And next, we're going to hear from Julie Reschke, who's a Senior Policy Division on the speed up, to bring us up to speed on the plan.
Thank you. Good morning, all. Again, Julie Reschke, Senior Analyst with the Policy Division at CMAP. Today, I'll be summarizing some existing transportation goals as we head into discussions about the potential vision for the Regional Transportation Plan, or as we'll refer to it, the RTP. So as you probably know, this is a time of significant regional planning for CMAP. In the coming year, CMAP will collaborate with the region to prepare a vision plan that provides high-level guidance about what the region would like to achieve. I know in the past, the project manager for the vision plan has spoken to you all, but we're just getting started on the multi-year process to develop the regional vision plan. We're excited to talk about it more at future meetings. But while this vision plan is being prepared, CMAP has a couple time-sensitive plans that are tied to federal requirements that are already underway. And one of these plans is the RTP, which we'll have the opportunity to discuss more today. Next slide, please. So while this approach to regional planning might be a little new for CMAP, it's not the first time we've developed a long-range transportation plan. In the past, transportation plan was included in both of the comprehensive plans of Go to 2040 and On to 2050. And given that the planning horizon for the RTP will continue to be the year 2050, the vision set in On to 2050 serves as a foundation for CMAP and its partners to build off of. Next slide, please. So metropolitan planning organizations like CMAP are required to develop long-range transportation plans for the regions they represent. Many of you might be familiar with planning efforts like local capital improvement plans, and the RTP is similar in the sense that it has a major focus on capital assets, but it differs in that it's larger in scale and looks ahead much farther into the future. This RTP in particular will look ahead about 25 years. So the RTP will consider multiple modes of travel, such as pedestrian, transit, freight, and roadway, and analyze how these different modes interact with each other across the system. Ultimately, the RTP's purpose is to be a forward-thinking plan that guides transportation investments, policies, and initiatives within the region. And per federal guidelines, we're working towards an October 2026 adoption date. Next slide, please. So long-range transportation plans have several important functions. By uplifting local voices and building regional consensus, the RTP will help describe Northeastern Illinois' vision for its transportation system. It will also conduct analyses about current conditions and anticipated outcomes to help inform planning strategies. And importantly, the RTP will identify capital projects that have a regional impact and options to fund them. And while the focus of the RTP is largely on capital assets, it will also put forward planning strategies to improve travel throughout the region. Next slide. So what's the impact of the RTP in our region's local communities? Well, one thing to consider is that it informs transportation programming. So goals identified in our transportation plan helps inform how we disperse funding to local initiatives and projects, which is a great benefit for projects that align with the plan priorities. The RTP also provides planning resources. So the plan will provide recommendations and implementation strategies that offer guidance about how local communities can align their local planning efforts with the regional vision for transportation. It also prioritizes impactful projects. So the RTP provides space for partners across the region to review and discuss the impacts of proposed projects that will impact Northeastern Illinois on a regional scale. And finally, the RTP will help explore funding options. So through the financial plan included in the RTP, the plan will explore the current capital funding landscape and consider options to meet unmet project needs. This is something we often hear about, that there's significant funding challenges to projects, and there's kind of a sentiment that there's not enough to go around. And the RTP offers a space for regional stakeholders to look further into potential ideas to achieve more sustainable solutions to capital funding gaps. Next slide, please. I want to emphasize that your voice and perspective are very important in the RTP development process. By learning more about local challenges, opportunities, and priorities, we can better understand the region's vision for transportation and areas where distinct approaches might be warranted. Your input is especially critical in the goal development phase of the RTP, which is where we are currently. Because once we achieve regional consensus on the goals of the RTP, all other aspects of the plan must be in alignment. So performance measures, investment approaches, and strategy recommendations must all help implement those goals. And by sharing your insights today and into the future, you can help guide the RTP outcomes. Next slide, please. So I'd like to provide a very high-level overview of what's all within the RTP. It's worth noting that we're guided by a few key questions. What is the future transportation system we want? What are the challenges and opportunities to get there? And how will we achieve the system that we do want? We're early in the process of trying to answer that first question. So as we understand the region's vision for transportation, we can set goals and targets associated with it. And for the second question, the analyses within this area of work will provide critical context to inform important decision points. So just now you heard about the socioeconomic forecast, which provides some helpful context to think about what are some of the future circumstances we might be planning for. If we have a larger proportion of residents over 65, how might we think about adjusting the transportation system to account for that? And finally, for the last question, as goals, opportunities, and challenges are identified, the region can begin establishing how it will achieve its vision by analyzing and prioritizing capital investments, preparing a financial plan, and setting strategies and implementation measures. So I know that was a lot of information, but the overview is just intended to show how the many work streams under the RTP will come together in the final plan. So as we begin considering goals for the RTP, CMAP wanted to understand what goals currently exist in the region. And to learn more, CMAP staff reviewed nearly 30 plans adopted by the federal government, state of Illinois, CMAP itself, county governments, transit agencies, and other stakeholders in the region. Included in your agenda packet is a memo detailing the process to review these plans and summarize some common goals, objectives, and strategies. On the screen are the overarching goals that were identified through this plan review. One example is the goal to increase mobility and accessibility, which speaks to objectives to manage congestion, support transit access, and expand the bike and pedestrian network. Reviewing these plans revealed common themes across shared priorities. And while not every plan included each of the goals listed on the screen, the summary intends to broadly represent the overarching goals that guide transportation plans in Northeastern Illinois. And conducting this work was a crucial first step to begin understanding the transportation priorities set by stakeholders throughout the region, which is a task that will continue through robust outreach and engagement through the plan's development. Next slide, please. So as stated previously, the RTP will build on the vision set in ON to 2050. And the ON to 2050 comprehensive plan was originally adopted in 2018 and updated recently in 2022. In the plan, the region achieved consensus on many transportation priorities, which are reflected in all 5 of the plan's chapters. But today we'll primarily focus on the mobility chapter, which sets a vision of a modern multimodal system that adapts to changing travel demand, a system that works better for everyone, and a region that makes transformative investments. And by reviewing the foundation set in ON to 2050, we have the opportunity to consider how the RTP might build off this foundation. So to quickly review the transportation goals that were set in the mobility chapter, we have them here on the screen of fully funding the region's transportation system, enhancing the approach to programming, harnessing technology, and improving travel safety, making transit more competitive, continuing on to the next slide, thank you, maintaining the status as a freight hub, leveraging the network to promote inclusive growth, and improving the resilience of the transportation network. Thank you. Continuing on to the next slide. So just taking everything into account, the plans we reviewed and the goals from ON to 2050, that's our understanding of the region's vision for transportation today. But I'm being told we're a little short on time, so I'm going to abbreviate the presentation a little bit, continuing forward to the next steps. So we've been talking to lots of stakeholders in the region. That's a task we're going to have to continue. We'll also have a public survey soon in a space where people can submit materials they would like us to consider. We also have a website that we'll continue to keep up to date, but the link for that is on the screen. I'm not sure that we will have time for discussion today, but we are looking for feedback on the RTP goals. So if people have any thoughts they want to raise now or would like to follow up with us for a conversation, we're happy to do that.
Well, we thank you. It's a very comprehensive report that you've done a nice job of trying to condense, so appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, we're gonna be talking about that again. Moving then to legislative update, John Carpenter's here.
Good morning, almost afternoon. My name is John Carpenter. I'm Director of Intergovernmental Affairs here at CMAP, and I will give you a brief recap of the legislative session and the things that we're working on these days. We appreciate the opportunity to provide this committee with legislative updates regarding activity from the Illinois General Assembly, legislative initiatives CMAP is pursuing, and our engagement efforts with federal, state, and government partners. We provide updates to this community to offer relevant legislative information related to CMAP's work that is useful to you and your communities. We also recognize that you receive much of this information from your COGS, COMS, and other associations. With that in mind, if there's any additional content or information that you think would be helpful to you, we're happy to consider that and include it in our legislative updates. Before we transition to the legislative updates, I want to highlight that the IGA team is currently in the process of updating our 2025-2026 legislative advocacy agenda, and will present a draft of that document to you at your November meeting. CMAP's advocacy agenda is developed every 2 years through the lens of On to 2050 and our strategic direction to ensure that we are building on advancing the region's goals outlined in both of those documents. The advocacy agenda is used to inform and advise policymakers, legislators, and other elected officials with actions that they can take to effectuate the focus areas of transportation, climate, regional economic competitiveness. Over the summer, the governor signed into law the FY25 budget. The FY25 state budget appropriates $53.1 billion for operating and capital expenditures. A few key items of note in the budget are one-time transfers from the road fund and the leaking underground storage tank fund to the public transportation fund, the PTF. These aren't new revenues, but rather shifting the funding burden of the PTF away from the general fund. The FY25 budget also appropriates $400 million from the road fund to IDOT and directs its spending on District 1 projects that primarily serve economically distressed communities. The governor also signed the RPA modernization bill into law this summer. Senate Bill 3389 is legislation which was initiated by CMAP to make some slight adjustments in the Regional Planning Act, our enabling statute. Those changes include reducing the number of board members in office needed to take office on very specific administrative matters to a simple majority, and that's effective January 1, 2025. This summer's also been busy with the Senate Transportation Committee's hearings around the region on transit service improvements. We've been closely monitoring and attending these hearings and responding to legislator inquiries as they arrive. Speaker Welch has also recently announced the formation of the House Transit Working Group. We've been in communication with members and leaders of the group, and yesterday provided an overview of part. Aaron and staff provided an overview to the entire working group on the part report. Otherwise, since we've last met, we've continued to spend our summer meeting with legislators to share more about the work that we have underway. We have discussed a variety of topics, of course, transportation, but also climate, water, housing, and we hope to convey the breadth and depth of CMAP's work. It's been a good opportunity to strengthen some of our existing relationships and build new ones with new legislators. Other than that, included in your packet are the bills that we've been tracking. We try to focus on bills that have been signed into law by the governor and are relevant to the Council of Mayors Executive Committee. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you. Obviously, the legislature is not in session at the moment, so that kind of calms you down a little bit, but
A good time to take a breather.
right. So thank you. Keep your eye on things. I think there's a lot to watch.
We do. Thank you.
All right, item 7, we're not probably gonna have anything too significant here. I just want to relate in conversations we've had recently amongst members of the staff. It's been suggested that we put a piece in our agenda where any of us that have a new idea in some type of a transportation related situation or growth situation, that you tell us about it, and we'll put it on the agenda and give you 5 minutes to talk about it if it's something that's good. So we're gonna start this at the next meeting. I've already got in my mind that in Batavia, we've done some very interesting things with street and road names and how they get approved and selected and who gets named and whatever. I'm not gonna get into it tonight or today, but I will have it for the next meeting to share with you about how we name streets and roads in our town. And it's a process and it has to be approved by the city council, any street name and whatever. So I think people will find that somewhat interesting. Moving then to item 8 is public comment. Do we have anybody in the audience or? Nobody has filed in,
Online.
nobody online? All right, our next meeting is going to be Tuesday, November 12th, 9:30 to 11 here at the CMAP office. And if there be no further business, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment. Motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Always.